Are you sure this is the lost continent of Atlantis?
There's no doubt about it. We're not human!
This is what happens when a very old legend is retold one time too many. Contrary to popular belief, the legend of Atlantis was not invented by Hollywood. It is a story that has been told and retold continuously since before recorded history in every corner of the globe. In North Africa, it is known as the legend of Attila. In France, Atlantica. Native Americans call it Azatlan. Mexicans, Aztlan. In ancient Hindu texts, the word catastrophe translates as Adyantika. These legends of great antiquity come from widely separated parts of the world that were not in communication with each other. The year is 3095 BC. In Egypt, a scribe is recording the history of an ancient civilization which was destroyed in a worldwide cataclysm. At the same time, on the opposite side of the Atlantic, a Maya stonecutter inscribes his temple with the exact same history. There are no telephones, no transatlantic shipping, and yet they both describe a lost continent and the cataclysm that sent it to the bottom of the sea. Who told them the story of Atlantis?
Here's the scenario. A great advanced civilization is destroyed. There are only a few survivors. They have high scientific knowledge, but they settle amongst primitive peoples who do not have any of those attributes or abilities. With the means at hand, they set out to try to pass down to the future the tradition, the story, the knowledge of what happened to them.
If Hancock is right, there may have been a few survivors from Atlantis spreading their history and their advanced knowledge around the world. This could explain the creation of many of the world's most mysterious monuments. With their great knowledge, survivors from Atlantis would have known how to create the perfect pyramids of stone in the Egyptian desert, and the strikingly similar pyramids that have only recently been unearthed in the dense jungles of Central America. Because of its size, shape, and precise alignment with the setting sun and rising moon, Stonehenge is thought to be an enormous calendar. But it has always been a mystery how the ancient Druids knew enough about astronomy and physics to create it. Could an Atlantean have passed on advanced knowledge to these ancient priests? The Nazca lines are ancient drawings carved into the sandstone plateaus of southern Peru. They are visible only from the air. If the Atlanteans had mastered aerodynamics, then it would be perfectly logical for them to teach others how to create these giant signposts. If your civilization had been destroyed and you had been set adrift, what enormous SOS would you create to beckon passing ships and people to your land?
The search for Atlantis is a search for mankind's past. And in many ways, evidence for Atlantis is all around us and in various different places all around the world.
But where did these survivors come from? To prove there was an Atlantis, we must find physical evidence of the lost continent and expose its legendary treasures.
We know that there was a big landmass in the Atlantic Ocean, and we know in different parts of the world that the same civilizations seem to exist, radiating out like rays of the sun from Atlantis.
But the problem is that the search for the exact location of Atlantis has been like a 10,000-year-old game of telephone, each generation adding its own spin to the story.
As long as that monster lives, my undersea kingdom of Atlantis can have no peace.
It is the intersection of fact and fantasy that has made the search for Atlantis the domain of science fiction instead of science. Nothing illustrates this better than a story written more than 100 years ago. In 1882, a reporter for the New Orleans Daily Picayune heard that two steamship captains who had made numerous Atlantic crossings in the same well-mapped shipping lane had seen a mysterious volcanic island appear in the middle of charted waters, where no island had ever been before.
Captain, there's an island here!
It was a potentially explosive scientific discovery, a tantalizing clue in the search for the lost continent of Atlantis. But instead of notifying historians or oceanographers or geologists, the reporter took the story and embellished it beyond all recognition. He thought he knew what his readers wanted, and it wasn't science. The mysterious volcanic island had somehow become a giant landmass. Crew members from one ship were said to have actually landed on the island. They reportedly found mysterious artifacts and stole them. This story ran in the April Fool's Day edition of the paper, and any hint of the real scientific significance of the original sightings were lost forever in one newspaper's folly. To find Atlantis, we realized would mean stripping away centuries of misinformation. We had to find the earliest complete account of Atlantis. It was written down 2,300 years ago by the Greek philosopher Plato, who heard the story from his grandfather, who heard the story from the ancient sage Solon.
Solon got his information from an Egyptian priest, a priest of Cayce in the Delta, who spoke of records stored in their temples going back more than 9,000 years before their time. And what those records said is that periodically a gigantic destruction visits the earth, and when it does so, mankind is forced to begin again like children with no memory of what went before.
According to the story passed down to Plato, the lost continent of Atlantis had at its center 2 rings of land and 3 of sea, encircling its crowning jewel, the Temple of Poseidon. Atlantis was ruled by 5 pairs of twins, whose wealth and power was, according to Plato, greater than any dynasty before or since. They had created great monuments at a time when scientists claim humankind was barely emerging from the Stone Age. The residents of Atlantis had hot and cold running water, said to be remarkable in quality and capable of miraculous healing. The great minds of Atlantis were engaged in the pursuit of science and technology. A great fertile plain provided Atlanteans with abundant produce of every description, and provided a home for exotic creatures. Every family shared in the wealth of the great continent. But after many years of prosperity and great achievements in science and technology, rumblings deep beneath the earth signaled the beginning of the end. First, there were tremors. Followed by violent earthquakes. It was a warning to get out before the beast at Atlantis' heart, a long dormant volcano, began to spew ash and poisonous gases. There would have been time to flee their homes, but there might not have been time to get off the island before the cataclysmic finale to the magical continent of Atlantis. Plato's account of the rise and fall of Atlantis seems almost too fantastic to be true. But did you know that other places just as fantastic have already been found? 3,000 years ago, Homer wrote about the legendary city of Troy, a kingdom overtaken by Greeks bearing gifts. No one thought Troy was real, but in 1873, the maverick archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann found Troy, and it was a legend no more. This part of the Arabian Peninsula is so devoid of life, it's called the Empty Quarter. But legend has it that the Empty Quarter was once home to a fabulous city called Ubar, a place Lawrence of Arabia called the Atlantis of the Sands. And in just the past decade, satellite imaging from NASA has proved that Ubar is real. This is the outline of that city buried under the sand. And within the impenetrable jungles of Thailand, the mythical city of Angkor Wat was only a rumor until these pictures proved Angkor Wat was real. The pictures were taken from the space shuttle Atlantis, whose very name offers a promise of future discoveries. We have the high-tech tools necessary to find Atlantis. We have evidence that legendary cities can be real. Atlantis should be within our grasp, if only we could find a map where X marks the spot.
When we return, ancient maps lead to a startling new theory in the search for Atlantis.
There is a truly lost continent on our planet, and that is the continent of Antarctica.
Then, underwater discoveries lead us to the hidden treasures of a secret location in just 50 feet of water on Atlantis in search of a lost continent.